This is Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing. You are watching Sporting Icons. You don't need to be anywhere else.
So big up Boxing Beats and Rhymes for breaking this story to us here online, and this comes via the Sun newspaper online and of course Talk Sport, where the WBO have in fact elevated Anthony Joshua to WBO Super Champion. And we'll go straight into the WBO's statement where they spoke to Talk Sport, and they said that they are in fact elevating Anthony Joshua to the Super Champion based on the fact that they want to relieve the pressure for him and his mandatories. So just give everybody a quick overview. So the WBA have got Alexander Povetkin on September the 22nd as their mandatory, hence the reason why he's having to fight Povetkin. That's what they ordered. Okay, the only way Joshua could have got out of the Povetkin one was if Wilder had accepted and actually signed the damn contract on time. Then in fact he would be fighting Wilder. But all that aside, he must fight Povetkin as the WBA mandatory challenger. So Joshua is super champion for WBA, and Manuel Charr is the WBA regular champion. And at some point he's going to have to fight Manuel Charr or whoever is holding on to that title at some point to solidify the WBA super and regular titles as one. Now the WBO, they would have obviously been next after the WBA. So as an example, if Joshua beat Povetkin, the WBA mandatory is out the way. It was then the WBO's turn to call their mandatory as to whoever their number one is or whatever it may be. But the WBO have Alexander Povetkin as the number one, but he's not the mandatory. Okay, so when he took on Christian Hammer, this is Povetkin, even though he beat Christian Hammer, that put him as number one WBO and number one WBA, but the WBA elevated him as mandatory, but the WBO did not. So rather than them have another fight or maybe install somebody else as a mandatory, then Joshua has to fight their mandatory straight after the Povetkin fight, they have done a good thing where they have said, you know what, rather than mess about with all that, we're going to have Alexander Povetkin as our mandatory right now. So when Joshua takes on Povetkin, not only is he getting rid of the WBA mandatory, but he's also going to get rid of the WBO mandatory. So that gives him a bit of breathing space to maybe negotiate for a bit longer for Deontay Wilder without it having to be the WBO mandatory or whoever it may be, a voluntary even. He can do whatever it is that he likes. We do know that September the 13th is the date that he will be fighting next at Wembley Stadium. If, of course, he's successful against Povetkin. No guarantees, of course, but hopefully he will be. But this is good news. Very, very good news that the WBO have done this. Will they create a regular title like WBA have? Difficult to tell. If they did, without looking at the rankings, as I said, right now Povetkin is the number one, but he's now the official mandatory. So I believe it will be between Dillian Whyte, who won the WBO international title this past weekend with his win over Joseph Parker, and he may well have to fight, say, maybe a Jarrell Miller to become the new mandatory, but Joshua won't have to face the new mandatory for another 18 months now, whereas it would have been next. So they have given him a bit of breathing time. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, if you're super champion, it means that you don't have mandatories. Well, that rule only really applied to Floyd Mayweather. Why? Because he was special, shall we say. So just because Joshua is super champion of WBA or WBO or whatever other sanctioning body anybody else may be the super champion of, they do not get away with mandatory defenses. That's all it is, okay? This was a special Floyd Mayweather thing. So good on the WBO. I had to give it up to them. They didn't have to do this. They have allowed him a bit of breathing space. So now, obviously, every time Joshua fights, all of his titles, so not only the WBO and the WBA on the line, but also his IBF is on the line, plus the IBO and whatever else that they may well create. So maybe they're going to create a special title now as super champion, potentially, because the WBA have, because on Joshua's title it says WBA Super Champion. On his WBO it just says WBO World Champion. So they may have to give him a new belt saying Super Champion. I don't know. It's not really that important, to be honest, but they've given him a bit of breathing space. He didn't have to face his WBO mandatory for another 18 months. Is this confusing? Potentially, but I think I know what I'm trying to say, and hopefully you guys get it as well. Anyway, so that is the news right now. So drop your thoughts below about Anthony Joshua becoming the super champion, in the fact that they have given him 18 months until he must defend his WBO title against their mandatory for 18 months. Drop your thoughts below, click that thumbs up, subscribe, catch you all on the next video.